All right, welcome 102 students. This is our reading discussion one. In this portion of the remote lecture, we will be taking a look at Starship Troopers. All right, a couple items of business. First of all, if you have any questions about anything in this video or in the course, go ahead and ask me by posting to the questions discussion board, or you can email me or just wait until we have our next class. And make sure you're participating in reading discussion number one. Those initial posts should be already done, so make sure you comment on your two of your peers' posts so that you can get that discussion going. Also, remote lecture number two is coming up, so make sure you take a look at that. That's going to be due on Saturday. And then our next group of readings is actually going to be Henry IV Part 1 by William Shakespeare. So there's some special instructions for that I want to let you know about. First of all, there is a pre-reading for that. You can find that on Canvas on the Argumentative Literature page, and it's basically the play in short story form, kind of geared towards children. That should give you a general idea of what the play is about, so you can read that real fast and know exactly what is going on in the play, because sometimes Shakespeare is a little bit hard to jump into just by itself. Okay, and then I want you to watch the performance. It's the BBC version. You can also find that on the Argumentative Literature page on Canvas. Okay, so usually when we have a discussion in class, this is what we're going to do. Since this is out of class, we're going to be doing things a little bit differently, but I also want you to know how things are going to go when we do one of these in class. You're going to get into your groups of 4 or 5. 6 is okay as well. Just a good group so that you can bring a lot of ideas to the table. And then I give you a list of discussion questions, and you're going to use those to lead your discussion. Now, if you find yourself talking about things that are far and away beyond those questions can help bring the group back and get back on task. So you feel free to discuss other things as long as they are related to the readings and the topic, but use those questions to help guide the discussion as a whole. Okay, it can be helpful to appoint a leader for the discussion to kind of be that person who decides that the discussion is ready to move on, so that you're not just relying on the group dynamic to make that decision. You can have that one person who is the taskmaster to bring you back and move on to the next question. Okay, and then you can also use your précis to bring up ideas. So it is handy to have that with you. You can also think of ideas that maybe you need to sneak onto your précis. So you can use that précis as kind of a living document and be able to add on to it if you need to. Okay. And then after you do that, we're going to come back and discuss as a class. Okay. All right. So let's jump into Starship Troopers. Now, this is a wonderful reading. It shows some good argumentation. I feel like it shows a little bit of flawed argumentation, or at least maybe some dated argumentation. But I think it's great to start our discussion and start to build on those ideas. So our first question here is, what do you think the main idea of Chapter 8 of Starship Troopers is? Okay, what is that that main idea? Okay, I think for my lecture here, we're going to skip this question and come back to it towards the end. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the second question. Analyze Rico's thoughts about Dillinger's execution. Use claim, evidence, and warrant. Do you agree? Why or why not? So, if you remember right, Dillinger was a soldier who was going through boot camp at the same time as Rico. He deserted and then proceeded to do many capital crimes. And when he got caught, and those crimes ultimately led to the killing of a little girl. And when he got caught, it was seen that he was on the rolls of the military, so he was handed back over to the military to face execution. So let's look at Rico's thoughts. I have that here, and we'll go ahead and listen to that portion of the reading.
That night I tried to figure out how such things could be kept from happening. Of course, they hardly ever do nowadays, but even once is way too many. I never did reach any answer that satisfied me. This Dillinger, he looked like anybody else, and his behavior and record couldn't have been too odd, or he would never have reached Camp Curie in the first place. I suppose he was one of those pathological personalities you read about. No way to spot them. Well, if there was no way to keep it from happening once, there was only one sure way to keep it from happening twice, which we had used. If Dillinger had understood what he was doing, which seems credible, then he got what was coming to him, except that it seemed a shame that he hadn't suffered as much as had little Barbara Ann. He practically hadn't suffered at all. But suppose, as seemed more likely, he was so crazy that he had never been aware that he was doing anything wrong. What then? Well, we shoot mad dogs, don't we? Yes, but being crazy that way is a sickness. I couldn't see but two possibilities. Either he couldn't be made well, in which case he was better off dead for his own sake and for the safety of others, or he could be treated and made sane, in which case, it seemed to me, if he ever became sane enough for civilized society, and thought over what he had done while he was sick, what could be left for him but suicide? How could he live with himself? And suppose he escaped before he was cured and did the same thing again, and maybe again. How do you explain that to bereaved parents, in view of his record?
All right, so let's take a look at this argument in terms of claim, evidence, and warrant. So first of all, I think here Rico is claiming that Dillinger's execution was justified. Okay, so that is his claim. Now, there are several other options that he brings up. Could he be treated? And it's a sickness. But the evidence he gives that it is justified is, first of all, if he was unwell, or if he was well, okay, then he got what he deserved, right? Okay, if he was sick, okay, then he says, for the safety of others, we shoot mad dogs, right? So to remove them from society so that they cannot hurt other people. The third possibility he examines is, what if we could make him well? Okay, what would be left to him if if he could be made well, right? And he says that if he would fully realize what he had done, the only thing left would be suicide, right? If he was truly understand what he did. So if we take this claim and we look at the evidence and the warrant, and try to figure out that warrant, we can see that uh, rehabilitation okay, is not best for self and society. Okay, so I think he makes a pretty good argument, but I still think this warrant, maybe has some leeway. Maybe society could be benefited by people who do go through that rehabilitation process and could be made well. Is he being too harsh here? Is there something left that could be salvaged? Rico doesn't seem to think so. I think this is a perfect gray area that that Heinlein is trying to exploit here. So that's kind of breaking down that argument in terms of claim, evidence, and warrant. So let's go ahead and bring back up our questions here. Okay, so was it justified? Do you agree? Why or why not? That's something that you're going to have to answer for yourself. Where do you stand on that? Okay. The next thing I want you to consider is, do human beings have rights? Begin with Heinlein's arguments and then proceed to your own. So if we start to think about do we have rights? I think Heinlein here, his argument is yes, we do have rights, but I think he is arguing that they aren't necessarily what we think they are, and that they certainly are not inalienable. He really comes down hard on that term when it comes to rights. So for Heinlein, rights aren't just something that you are given or that you have just because you were born, right? In his society, rights have to be purchased, and especially the certain rights when it comes to partaking in government. So in his society that he's imagining, in order to vote or run for office, you have to spend time in the military. So that's a way that he can try to make a society that's duty-based. Okay, so kind of moving on from his argument to your own, why do you have rights? Is it because in this country we have a piece of paper? Does a piece of paper with a Bill of Rights on it mean that you have rights? Or is it something else? If we think back to Thomas Jefferson, he believes that these rights are unalienable. You have them because you are a person, and that is certainly a revolutionary idea in its day. Heinlein is trying to say, well, that's maybe too revolutionary even for our day. That just because we are people, we have rights. Now, Heinlein gives the example of can we take away these rights? He pulls up the example of the ocean, right? If a man is in the ocean and drowning, is the ocean going to say, "Oh, wait, hold on, this person has an unalienable right to life. And if I make him drowned, I'm taking away that right. I can't do that, right? The ocean won't do that. The ocean doesn't have the type of thought process that we have to give ourselves these rights, and so the ocean's not going to mind that right. He also gives the example of, what right to life does a parent have when their child is in danger, right? It is your duty to protect that child, and even to the point of losing your life. So he's very much he believes in rights here, and I think he's just saying that the rights aren't coming from the place that you think they are, and that just giving yourself more rights is not necessarily going to make you a better person or a better society. All right, so that's kind of exploring some of the rights. Okay, what rights do we have? We talk about the Bill of Rights. Those 10 statements, things like the freedom uh, of speech. The freedom of religion. We talk about freedom of the press. We talk about freedom from unlawful seizures. We can't quarter troops. There is a due process. Jury of peers. All these rights that we have. Are there any rights that are not covered in the Bill of Rights that you think that you have, right? And why do we have them? Is it because we have this piece of paper that was put into to place, or does it come from somewhere else? And if we look at Heinlein's arguments, he's saying that these rights they're a social construct. And they really don't mean anything unless there is something attached to them that makes you want uh, to fulfill them, right? And he's saying that duty is the thing that keeps us uh, enjoying our rights. Okay. Let's talk about the three he talks about. Life. Okay. We have a duty to keep keep others safe, right? And he says that's super important if you want to vote or if you want to run for office. You need to put yourself in a position where you're protecting other people's life above your own. So serving into the military. Liberty. Okay, Professor Dubois says that you can't have liberty in unless it's purchased by the blood of patriots. That has to be renewed every so often, or else someone's going to just come by and take it away. And the last inalienable right found in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. Okay, and Professor Dubois here says that that's not really a right. How is that a right? And that uh, anybody can come by and try to take that away. But if your mindset is right, then it's not possible to take that away. But is it really a right? And he's arguing that no, it's not a right. It's just a state of being that some people can achieve, but most of us let people and outside influences disrupt our pursuit of happiness. So those are some of Heinlein's ideas about what the rights are and why we have them. All right, so what are the consequences of our rights? And I think this is where Heinlein is really trying to figure out, why a society like he's imagined might be something that might be possible, or at least interesting to write about. So why we have what are the consequences of these rights? Well, he's saying that society, as you give society more rights, it starts to focus on the self. Okay, rights are all about the self. Okay, and that I have the right to eat ice cream every day. What if that was a right? Then people would have, the ice cream business would be doing great, but there would be other consequences that come with that. Maybe someone is lactose intolerant, but they have uh, the right to ice cream, and it might lead to something bad. That's kind of a silly example, but I think that's where Heinlein is going with this. The more rights we give people, the more they feel entitled to, and eventually, he's a little bit worried that society might collapse upon itself as we focus on the self rather than on duty. Okay, so are all rights equal? This is an interesting question. Does the freedom of speech trump, someone's pursuit of happiness? I have the right to, go to, let's say, a public place and shout swear words at people, right? That's my constitutional right. But is that infringing on people's pursuit of happiness? Probably. And is my right to say those swear words in public spaces and in front of children and whatever, is my right more important than people's pursuit of happiness? That's what one of the things we have to ask ourselves. What are the most important rights, or are they all equal? And I don't really have an answer to this one, right? We would like to think that all rights are equal and that one right shouldn't infringe upon another right, but obviously it can happen. And which one is more important? Okay. The next thing is how should we protect rights? And I think one of Heinlein's problems with society is one way that we try to protect rights is to give people more rights, and he's worried that that this is not the way to protect rights. And in his imagined society, they do the opposite. They take some rights away or reserve them for people who demonstrate that they can be a dutiful uh, person in society, right? So, uh, you know, is there other ways to protect rights? It's something to think about. All right, so let's go ahead and go back or go to our next question here. Okay, how does the reading define duty? What duties do individuals have? So Heinlein is very much talking about duty in this chapter, and he brings up the example of the juvenile delinquent. And I think this is a good way to kind of discuss what he thinks duty means and how that works in society. So he says that a juvenile delinquent is a contradiction in terms, and that it doesn't really even exist. So juvenile meaning not yet being adult, and delinquent meaning failing in duty. So he's saying that it can't exist because duty is an adult virtue. Kids and children do not have duty. It is impossible for them to grasp this idea because he says, we're not born with moral sense, and duty uh, is greatly tied to morality. So when a child does something wrong, then it's up to the parents to correct them, and the parents should have that sense of moral obligation that the child lacks. Now, what a child has instead of that moral compass is a survival instinct. So they only know how to try to take care of themselves. And I think Heinlein is really kind of jabbing at our society, saying, you know what? If you're focused on obtaining more and more rights, then you're not an adult. Adults look for ways that they can perform duties and be be protecting other people and thinking about other people rather than thinking about the self and preserving oneself. That's the thought process of a child, and so duty becomes this moral sense, and really it becomes the defining attribute of a functioning adult in society. So what he's saying is we need more functioning adults in society rather than these juveniles that just are trying to make it easier to survive. What duties might you have? So if you're a parent, you've got that duty towards that child, right? If you are seeking to be a person who votes or run for office, then you have to have that military duty as well. As you apply on more of these duties, you become a better citizen and you're able to partake in the higher echelons of the society and have a say in how things are done in the country. All right, so that's really his definition of duty, and we'll touch upon it again a little bit later. Okay, so now here's a leading question. This would get thrown out of a court of law, but will a natural obsession with rights lead to a moral and political downfall as society forgets responsibilities in favor of what it is entitled to? Now, I think this is a leading question. I think this is the question that Heinlein is trying to get you to ask yourself, and I think he believes yes, and obviously within the fictional universe of Starship Troopers, this has happened, right? It was the obsession with rights that led to the downfall of what would have been our society. Now, their society has a completely different set of problems, right? They're being attacked by aliens. But as far as an obsession with rights, they don't really have it, because if you want those rights, you go out and serve in the military and you get those rights, and it really becomes kind of like going out to get your driver's license, right? People are excited. The people who want it are excited to do it. Now Rico, he does it kind of to impress a girl, but he doesn't have the greatest motives to do it, but he grows. His growth throughout the novel is tremendous, and he eventually becomes that person who is able to make those moral decisions and really begin to be a helpful part of society as he goes through this change. Heinlein says yes. I don't know what you think. I am excited to hear what you think in your essay. So the next thing I have is let's talk about the society for just a minute. Let me bring up my whiteboard here. So if we remember, the claim from the Declaration of Independence, okay, remember it has two parts. Okay, what does the government do? Okay, they protect rights. Okay, there it is. They protect our rights. But what do the people do? Okay, it's their job to check the government. Okay, and that's it. That's the claim of the Declaration of Independence. Now, Heinlein is saying, now wait a minute. Okay, we have government to protect rights. That's great. Okay, in their society, government protects rights. Okay, that's why they're at war with the bugs and the skinnies, right? To protect those rights. Okay, and do the people check the government? Yes, a certain amount of people do check the government. Okay, now they have to do their service. But anybody can do that and obtain that right. Now, what Heinlein is saying is, you know what? This is great. So is this, but you know what? This is just a little bit too powerful. Okay, who's gonna check the people? Okay, because people just want more and more and more, right? And they want to get more rights, and that's what Heinlein is afraid of. So, who checks the people? Okay, the military. Okay, by requiring that service and needing that in order to vote. So here we have the claim of the Declaration of Independence, kind of modified by Heinlein to include, you know what, the people need to be checked because they just want more things from the government. All right, so let's go ahead and click back over to uh, the presentation here. Let's go ahead and just run through these, make sure we hit them all. So Heinlein's imagined society, okay, tries to be duty-based. Okay, citizenship is purchased through military service. Okay, and he defines citizenship as the right to vote and the right to run for office. Okay, and that is purchased through military service. It's all volunteer. No one's forced into the military. In fact, Rico says, I don't want to serve next to someone who is conscripted because, they don't want to be there, and I want to trust my life to people who want to be there. It's a 2-year term if you want to get that right to vote. Now, of course, you can stay for longer, and a little bit of a spoiler, Rico does. But once you've done that 2 term, you can bounce and be able to have full citizenship. Okay. You also need to have instruction in moral philosophy, and this is done at the high school level. Rico's already done it at this point of the book. That's he's flashing back to his time there with Professor Dubois, and you have to have it. Everybody takes it. You don't receive a grade, but you have to have it. All right, so some key concepts. We talked about juvenile delinquency. Is it the fault of the child or the fault of the parents? Heinlein would say it's definitely the fault of the parent if a juvenile is not performing the way they should. Okay, he touches on punishment, and I think this is where he loses a lot of readers nowadays. Because he is quite harsh of some means of punishment. Okay, he says that punishment needs to be cruel and it needs to be unusual. Now, these are terms that maybe he's putting a different spin on than we're used to thinking about. In cruel, he means it needs to be memorable because if it's not something that that a person's going to forget. If they forget about it, what's the point of doing it? And unusual means that it needs to be not a regular thing. He's saying it shouldn't be something that's done often. and it should be very much saved for specific situations. Okay. He talks about that moral instinct. We're born with the survival instinct, and we learn how to be moral adults, right? Okay. To care about more about others than you do yourself. Okay. And he defines that as duty. Okay. He talks about rights. There's no such thing as unalienable rights, and rights need to be purchased through military service. We talked about juvenile delinquency. He says it's a contradiction in terms because you have to fail in duty, but a child is not capable of being dutiful. That's an adult virtue. Okay, one has to be an adult to have a duty. All right, so that concludes our lecture here. Again, if you have any questions about the material or this lecture, please get on the questions discussion board. Send me an email or talk to me next time we're on class, and we'll see you next time.